Or 64.
We might as well record. We might as well record this shit. We're doing the podcast already. This is what happens when Joe Rexrode and Cory Curtis jump on. This is completely. It's just stupid. Why do we always have to revolve around you, Joe? Why do you have to make this thing so difficult?
I was worried it was about me.
I was asked a time. I said sounds good, and I just asked you to make sure. I just want to check to see if we were going to be on time, because we've had other guests. Well, okay, fine. Me too, in the past, who have totally botched the timing.
It's just, see, Cory Curtis is always punctual. He's always ready to go. He's got a bunch of interesting things to bring to the table that I don't necessarily have prepared. And then there's Joe.
He's always impossibly tan too. Tan and fit, unlike us.
By the way,
Cory.
I appreciate it. I officially am retiring from Iron Man. It's over.
Oh, really?
It's too much. It's too much. I'm done.
You made it out alive. Congratulations.
Thank you. Anybody wants to buy a bike, I've got one.
Listen, that's a pretty incredible thing. I mean, what the News 2 crew is overwhelmingly active in a way that most of us media types are not, between you and Emily running marathons. And
Kayla and Emily make me look like a gigantic fat slob.
But then consider every other outlet in town, Cory. What do we look like? See, I mean, it's all you got to keep perspective.
You look like
on
radio
this.
hosts.
We look like sports radio hosts. The tough scene.
What people don't know is right now you're both in your tighty whities and there's a bowl of Cheerios in front of you, and you're in your mom's basement.
Buddy,
Honey
that's been
Cheerios,
me for 3 years.
Sugar.
You've just described my entire career. It's only recently that I've gotten out of the basement and been allowed upstairs in the main house. All right, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today, I guess. I want to talk about the stadium thing, because the stadium thing, I think, is hugely interesting. I just had Nate Rao on the radio show. By the way, Cory Curtis, WKRN News 2, Sports Extra. You can see all of the News 2 crew covering all things local. Joe Rexrode, Robbie and Rexrode, 6 to 10 a.m., 102.5 The Game, and, of course, theathletic.com. Very good. I had Nate Rao on the radio show today, and we were talking about the idea that Bill Lee wants to give the Tennessee Titans $500 million in bonds to build probably a $2 billion stadium. Joe, how much have you guys talked about this throughout the last couple of weeks?
Quite a bit. I mean, I'd say we probably could talk about it more, but I know that we will talk about it more as things start to take shape, because there's certainly a nice chunk of money that still needs to be figured out, and how exactly that's going to play out. And I mean, we know, you guys know how these things can go. Sometimes they can go pretty smoothly. I mean, the Buffalo thing that just went down, they got $850 million in public money. They also got a $200 million loan from the NFL. So I imagine
that's not unusual, though.
Which one?
The NFL. The NFL has been in the business of a lot of these loans lately.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, I was just saying, I mean, that's something you could probably expect, something like that with this. But $850 million in public money is that's a pretty significant number. But really, that thing went pretty smoothly, start to finish. You think about, obviously, some of the recent situations where teams have moved. I mean, there's a wide range of possibilities. I mean, I feel like the Titans are getting out in front on this, but there's still some things to figure out here.
Yeah, I mean, look, without a doubt, the Titans are getting out in front. I've been talking about this issue, and I'm not the only one I know, for years, because it's about what Nashville wants to be. And everybody was like, oh, I don't want to build a new stadium for the Titans, blah, blah, blah. That's nonsense.
Whatever.
This is about what Nashville wants to be, okay? And that's, you build this stadium for whatever the city wants. Yes, it will be where the Titans play. Yes, I expect the Titans to have control of it. And so I don't know how much money the Titans are going to front. I don't know how much state money they'll take. I don't know how much city money that they'll take, because I expect the Titans to front a large chunk of the money and want to control what this stadium looks like, how it functions, and who it gets leased to.
Especially with all of these conversations that have been, I mean, really just conjecture and foolish on the part of like the MLB to Nashville people to put out renderings of a baseball stadium on the Titans property, basically, in a way that the NFL had, or the NFL the team here had no interest in being a part of. I think there's so many different elements of this. For example, like I had a caller bring this up today, Cory. Like, what do you do with something like the Music City Grand Prix that has I mean, they've just agreed to a multi-year deal on that. It was a huge success, I think, by all accounts in its first year here. And that's something between that and the timeline for the World Cup, which Nashville is still very much in consideration of. These are all early questions, but I think there are so many different facets of this outside of just the money as to how soon and how realistic it is that this ends up getting done.
Well, look, I think it's going to get done sooner rather than later because
Agreed.
everybody realized they want it to. If they start by if they get the stadium up for 2026, it'll be ready for the World Cup. And I think that there's a lot of people here who would like to spotlight this city with the World Cup, with this big, fancy new stadium heading up this giant new development on the river. I think they like the optics of that a whole heck of a lot more than the optics of Nissan Stadium that's still with undeveloped property out in front of it. So I think the city has a lot of motivation to make it happen. The Titans have a lot of motivation to make it happen because I think they'd like to run the facility. They understand how antiquated and under budget their facility was. Burke Nihill, in fact, congratulated his predecessors on being the only people in NFL history to come in under budget on a stadium. Just think about this. The $500 million that the governor has proposed to put forward is almost double what Nissan Stadium cost, and it would be probably 1/5 of the cost of what a new stadium would be. Because look, we can keep floating numbers. Those numbers are only going to go up. Inflation isn't going anywhere. It's only going to get more expensive. And I think Burke Nihill is on the money on this, where he's like, we want to get this started because it's only getting more expensive. I think that's smart. That's good business. I think Amy Adams Strunk has hired a lot of smart people over there. And so I think the fact that the governor put that forward yesterday just shows you that the fast forward button has been hit on this thing. And the city and the state and the Titans all know it.
I mean, it's almost the same kind of principle as, just to bring it back to like local sports tie of getting ahead of the AJ Brown contract before another Christian Kirk comes along. Like this is exactly the way that I think these things are being viewed now. And, I mean, Rex, there's plenty of arguments against these things. Like I have regularly on my radio show, David Sampson, a former president of the Miami Marlins, who like famously is one of the most, and regarded as one of the most evil people in sports for how he bilked the city of Miami out of so much money, so much public money to build a stadium that's now like a blight on that area of town. And with that, I thought a lot of people would move away from publicly funded stadiums. And yet here is Buffalo, as we talked about, in a much different circumstance, because they're not going to be in contention for a Super Bowl with this thing because it's open air. They're taking $850 million in public funds for an open air stadium that's not going to be in consideration for a Super Bowl, or not going to be a lock outside of the odd. They played one at the Giants Stadium a couple of years ago where the weather worked out really, really well.
I think they should get one, by the way, but yes.
Buffalo? Yeah.
That'd
be cool.
They lucked out with Jersey.
They won't do that.
Hey, one of the most famous football games in history, Lambeau Field, Cowboys, Packers, -1 million. We still talk about it. So I
was at the Titans game when they played the Patriots and it was -14 in the playoffs. That was stupid. So I hate your idea.
But to your point, Buck, on this, and I think it's a great point, Cory, on the World Cup. If they could actually get that timeline solidified, I think it'd be awfully tough for FIFA to not make Nashville one of the cities. FIFA's hard to read, and I'm sure they're looking for a bag of McDonald's somewhere in there to also make it happen.
I was like, come on, Joe, we know what FIFA's all about. Same thing as the Olympic Committee's all about.
That's right. But I think that would help a lot. That would be a huge deal. You think about, but so different from Buffalo, Buck, like you just said. Look, if this happens, I believe Nashville will be a regular Final Four city. Right. I believe Nashville will be involved in the college football playoffs, at least as an occasional championship game host, but maybe more than that, depending on how it gets reconfigured. The concerts, of course, all winter long. Anything you can think of, we will have that here because everything else is locked into place. So the benefits of this. Yeah, especially if you want to compare those two situations, that is a please keep the Bills in town situation.
Yeah,
this could be. I mean, look, this could make a lot of people a lot of money, and I think that I think that's reflected already in, what Governor Lee has done. I mean, I think anybody can see that, and of course the enclosure is very key here, because that's that you have to have that. Which kind of makes me sad, by the way, guys. I don't know how you feel, but I know that the Nissan Stadium needs a lot of work and updating, but I love probably 3, 4, 5 Sundays here are great. You couldn't beat that.
I agree with you. And we were actually looking at some of the retractable roof stadiums. I don't like the ones that are built like Reliant or Lucas Oil, where it's like a sunroof and it just kind of opens the top. But if you check out Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, that is really well done. Right. And it looks, when it's open, it looks like an open air stadium. And so I think that, because I agree with you, Joe, I think there still should be positioned to play open air football here, because the weather is too nice not to. And I think that the technology and the planning has improved enough to where you can build a facility like that where it actually looks like an open air stadium with the roof open.
I think that, you're talking about there's always going to be some degree of like, we're sanitizing football a little bit, right? But this is just this is the way that the NFL is trending. And frankly, I care more about what the playing surface is made of more than I do, that it's open air or not open air, just for the sake of playing the games and for player injuries and things of that nature. But like, I think there's so many different ways to look at this, because you're right, Joe. Like I love Sundays are a lot more fun when it feels like football weather, like when it's mid-October, or I mean, even now, early November, with the way that it's hot as hell still in October here in Middle Tennessee, and probably going to keep getting hotter over the next couple of years, one would imagine. But I think the more that this kind of fleshes out, is there a reason that it has to be retractable versus like translucent, for example? SoFi has that kind of thing, that you still have that weird like sliver of open air at the top, despite the translucent ceiling, where John Gruden's furious for a variety of reasons, but furious at that particular time because they're in a lightning delay, even though they're technically in a closed air stadium at SoFi. I don't know if there is one specific reason why to do one over the other than, what is the price point? What is the estimate on that?
Well, and it's about, I know at least one stadium, the difference was priced out to be 300 million. I don't remember which one, but the vibes I'm getting, and this isn't set in stone, but I'm getting anti-retractable roof vibes.
Me too.
So, really? which I think is cost related. But man, I agree, Cory. I would love for that to be an option, and even again, like on the concert front, I think the open air concert, like some of the Garth Brooks or whatever. I mean, I think that's
where you have the option to close it. Yeah. No, I agree with you completely. And look, I know it's easy for me to say it. If you're going to spend the money and do it right. Don't spend $2.5 billion or $2 billion and regret that you didn't spend the other $300 million. I mean, that's cutting off your nose to spite your face.
And if that really is all it is, I would I mean, if it's less than $500 million,
right?
I think it's worth it.
If you're, because you can pay.
Spend all the money.
Well, listen, I mean,
you're right, Cory.
We're in the middle of free agency now. We're talking about a salary cap that isn't real. The damn I think that Rexrode Loki just reported something, because there are similar vibes coming out of that situation on my end as well. So I think that's something to keep an eye on moving forward, depending on how much further we get in a short amount of time. But I mean, it's the damn NFL. If they could do more than $200 million loans, I mean, we're in the middle of free agency technically still, and the Rams are out here giving Bobby Wagner $50 million. Like, there's just no salary cap. I don't believe that there's any kind of financial limit, that there's any kind of monetary limit on any of this stuff. Just spend the damn money. I don't care if you're one of the more cash, not as cash. You're not Jerry Jones. You're not Stan Kroenke, but you still got plenty of money to spend.
Well, look, Kroenke's out there. Another bill. All right, another bill.
Well, that's Walmart money, kids. That's a different kind of money.
Well, it's not. I mean, look, the issue is never spending money. It's making it work under the cap, right? And I guess that's the question, because I always say the bill eventually comes due, because the bill is eventually going to come due. But I think the Rams are looking at this with their Matthew Stafford window. How many more years does Matthew Stafford have? We have a Super Bowl team right now. Aaron Donald, how many more years does he have? So we're going to try to win another Super Bowl right now. And I think that that's the tact that they are taking. And we're in a different era, guys. We're in an era where you don't have 4 to 5 years anymore. You have 2 to 3 if you're lucky. Okay. And so these younger, newer GMs and head coaches are much more willing to trade, much more willing to take on bad contracts to try to get themselves over the hump, because they know if they don't, that they can get blown out. You can win a Super Bowl and get fired a year or two later. Just ask Doug Peterson. I mean, just ask Bruce Arians.
There's a statue to Doug Peterson outside the Eagles Stadium.
Yeah, and he gets fired. So they know they've got to win, and they've got to keep winning. I still don't think you should spend money unwisely. I think an aging linebacker getting that kind of money is a bad use of money for me. But if that's the way they want to spend it, they've won a lot more football games than I have. So more power to them.
Well, I mean, but it's, just to kind of pivot into offseason talk, I guess, since we might as well talk a little bit of Titans while we're here. I mean, it's been a hugely practical approach on this end of things, right? Like, they didn't go out and pay the big money wide receiver free agent contract. They went and traded for one that was more within their price range, that had aged well under the current market, especially when you see the Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. And I mean, they're going to have to pay one of those guys eventually, but it's been a much more frugal is one way to look at it, but practical, probably the best way to assess it, Rexrode, where you can't dispute any of what they've done, but I guess you're looking at it and saying, okay, are you really enough to compete with everything else that's out there when everybody else has gone just batshit crazy in the AFC?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, if you weren't going to change quarterback, if you weren't going to figure out some way to go get one of those top guys, what was realistic? Frankly, the Titans have done more than I thought they might do. I thought it might be even more quiet than this. They went and got a guy who I think can be a number 1 tight end, and they went and they got Robert Woods. So I really like that move. Look at all these teams. Well, I shouldn't say all, but basically everybody in the league is here or there restructuring a deal, right? To kick the can down the road. So where did they look? They looked at a guy that they feel pretty good about wanting to have him down the road, as compared to, well, look, I mean, what did they do with Tannehill? Maybe they regret that now. I mean, I feel like some of their recent moves are a little bit prohibitive now, but again, I mean, they've found enough money to do these things. They've found a way to keep Zach Cunningham. I mean,
they
overall,
haven't restructured him, have they? And I find that shocking.
They did restructure him.
Okay.
He's gonna count against the cap for just over 6 as opposed to 10.
Okay, that was the number I expected from him. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So overall, like, I think it's. I mean, look, I think it's been pretty effective.
Agreed.
Based on the situation, and of course now they just have to have an incredibly good draft.
Well, not even an incredibly good draft, Cory. They just have to have some guys who give them something in year 1, as opposed to the last 2 seasons. Christian Fulton, to his credit, is gonna be a above average to potentially, really, really good corner, depending on how the rest of his career goes. He's only in year 2, and we saw him take a substantial leap with a more normalized offseason. And this draft bodes well for what exactly their needs are. But we thought that last year, and then they waited until day 3 to take a wide receiver who just didn't matter in any way, shape, or form last year. So I don't know.
Got cut. He got cut.
Well, you did get cut. He actually did get cut. That's right.
Okay, a few things here.
Yep.
Number one, when I agree largely with everything Joe said. And when you look at what the Titans have got with Henry, Hooper drives the boat, Chief. Hooper, AJ Brown, and now Robert Woods, whose addition I like really well. Those guys, when you look at the AFC and how good it is out there, those guys give you a chance.
Yep.
All right. No amount of money that you spend at those positions is going to give you a much better chance if Tannehill doesn't suck in the playoffs. Okay. And so it's on him. It's on him at this point. And that's why I view this as a last chance to do anything in the postseason. Because if he doesn't do it, if he doesn't do it this year in the postseason, they can't stand up for him. There's no standing up for it whatsoever. As for the draft, we stood here on our desks pounding our chest saying, after the disaster of Isaiah Wilson, there is no way they could take a chance on a guy like Caleb Farley, no matter how talented they think he may be, because back surgery is not ACL surgery. It's back surgery, and it stinks, okay? That guy's made of glass, all right? He's played 1 season of football. He's had 2 back surgeries and 2 ACLs, all right? That's what they drafted last year. How on earth can they take a chance at all on a draft pick? They have to find the draft pick who is wrapped in bubble wrap, all right, has 16 layers of cellophane around it, has, you know, those like reflectors that you used to have all over your bike? It's covered with those so nothing can hit it. They have to come up with the safest first round pick of all time, because they cannot go a 3rd year in a row with a first round pick who gives them absolutely nothing. They could trade away all their 1s for 7s and they would get more than they got the last 2 years.
So you're saying they're drafting a punter who's never been injured? Is that
No,
what I'm hearing?
I'll take it because they could get more from him.
He's saying that they're drafting Jameson Williams, of course, at 26.
Pretty much a lock.
Who's the other? You know what? Who's the other kid from Alabama? The other receiver who's hurt?
John Mechie.
He was awesome at the combine. I mean, he was awesome at the combine. I loved him. I'd love him in round 2 if he was on the board.
Sure, I think that. Listen, but that's the thing, right? Like they don't have to do that. They don't have to do the Jameson Williams thing this year. They can let the Chiefs do that. And that may be dangerous at some point down the road when the Chiefs take Jameson Williams and he ends up being an incredible compliment. Maybe not Tyreek Hill, but something damn near good enough to give them what they now lack in that offense as a vertical threat.
It's not $30 million. Yeah,
exactly. Right. It makes all the sense in the world for them. And in the same way, you know, Cory, just to kind of work off your point, I mean, they're doing the same thing with Tua, right? Tua and Tannehill, in a way that is weird because they're both have Dolphins connections, are now in prove-it seasons where you've got Tyreek Hill and I'm blanking. Jalen Waddle. You've got Mike Gesicki. They still technically have Devontae Parker under contract, and they just went and signed Chase Edmonds from the Arizona Cardinals, with the savant allegedly in the newest savant in the NFL, with Mike McDaniel calling the plays, who understands how to work around quarterback limitations famously. And then there's, you know, Ryan Tannehill and Todd Downing in a much different light, heading into much different stages of their careers. But it's just such an interesting thing to kind of play out. And they don't have to do the injured wide receiver because there's so many damn good wide receivers, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay.
They didn't have to take a hurt DB last year. Okay. There were good ones there.
Well, I will counter this. If look, the Caleb Farley thing is very different than the Jameson Williams thing. It's an ACL. And I'm sorry, but
Thank
ACL.
You.
Yeah, but listen, if he's there with his speed, if you absolutely love, that to me is not a non-starter. And if I'm John Robinson, send me all your gifts and memes about how I love injured guys. I'll take them all. Send them all my way. And when this guy's finally gives the Titans a deep threat, someone who can actually take the top off a defense and scare safeties.
They had Khalif Raymond. What are you talking about? They had them in their hip pocket.
Taywan Taylor's there.
They let him get
Taywan Taylor, and you let him off the
hook. Finish your analysis, Rexrode.
I've got nothing else. That was fantastic. No, I just look. I say keep an open mind, even on injured Jameson Williams, because his top gear is different.
Yeah.
Agreed. No, and that would be, I mean, there's a variety of different ways that you can complement A.J. Brown and Robert Woods this year, whether it is Jameson Williams at whatever point he ends up being healthy, whether it is Treylon Burks, who has done so many different kinds of things at Arkansas. And
he's pretty.
We did. Oh my God, he's great. Greg Cosell and I did the podcast yesterday, and Greg made him sound like, if deployed correctly, which of course implies competency on the part of the play caller. And I think there's a degree of competency that still has yet to be proved with Todd Downing, but time for that at a later date. If deployed right, you have a version of Deebo Samuel or Cordell Patterson that you could do a lot of fun things with that they severely lacked since they let Jonnu go. Like that's my thing. There's so many different ways that they could go. You can't, I don't know that necessarily, Cory, that I would fault them if they did the Jameson Williams thing. I would get it. And it would just be a whole ordeal. I just think that there is still, the offensive line stuff, even if they did it for a third straight year, like He's not Joe Burrow. He's been taking these hits a lot longer than Joe Burrow. We remember talking about Dupree before they played the Bengals in that playoff game. And he's like, yeah, he doesn't fear that yet. He hasn't had to yet. He hasn't had that accumulation of hit. And I'm looking at the dude who got sacked almost as many times as Joe Burrow last season, and Ryan Tannehill be like, yeah, that dude knows what it feels like to get hit. I think he needs some help on the front end.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, Zion Johnson to me is a good pick at 26.
So
I mean,
good.
Yeah, I mean, you plug him in there, you got 10-year starter at left guard. So I have no problem going offensive line. By the way, Zion Johnson's also healthy. I get what you're saying, Joe, about Jameson. I do, because they don't have that taken off the top guy. And if you think he's elite and you think he's healthy, I get it, but you just cannot take a chance. And what did we hear about Caleb Farley? That no other team in the league was going to take him in the first round because of his medicals. All right. And I think that they got a little overly confident after the way Jeffrey Simmons worked out. Because like I've said, my other problem with Caleb Farley is he's played so little football and he's been hurt so many times.
Yeah.
And
so it's a different situation.
It is a different situation. And so, and again, this gets me back to my whole other point. And what I've been saying for forever about this draft is that if they can trade back and get more top 100 picks, that there are so many players who can help them on the offensive line, at wide receiver, or at tight end, that they could benefit from having 2 or 3 picks rather than picking at 26, because there are those guys out there. As for having that Debo guy, yes, I agree with that. But I think Robert Woods can do some of those things for them as well. Now, he wasn't as thick as I expected him to be when we met him, but he is
when we met Burks.
No, I meant Robert Woods when we met him the other day. He wasn't as thick, because they like to run him end around and do some of those things with him as well. But he's very bendy. He's got, like AJ's, he's built like a M1 tank.
AJ's an ox.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a different breed. So yeah, and look, what I forgot who said it. That the Titans look better coming off the bus than anybody. John Robinson and Mike Vrabel have a type. They like big and they like physical, and I don't blame them, because in the fourth quarter, that shows up, baby. We've seen it over and over again, and I think Treylon Burks absolutely fits that category.
No better embodiment of that than Nick Westbrook-Akina, wide receiver 2 in perpetuity. Joe Rexrode at The Athletic, Robbie and Rexrode, 102.5 The Game, 6 to 10 a.m. You can catch Cory Curtis on WKRN News 2 with the whole crew, and Sports Extra Daily live streaming.
Oh, you brought it up.
Their digital platforms. Yeah, I did, buddy. Yeah, I did.
Sports Extra Daily is no more.
Oh, damn it.
All right. Well, we broke some more news on here.
Not broke. It's been off the air for 2 weeks. Thanks for watching, guys.
This is what I get. I try to plug people's stuff. This is what I get. Goodbye, boys.
Hey, I had a blog in 2005. Could you plug that before we go?
Shut up, Rexrode.